Pete Feenstra, rock in your world. On Get Ready to Rock Radio.
This is the Pete Feenstra feature for Get Ready to Rock Radio. Welcome to the show. Tonight I'm speaking to Savoy Brown founder member Kim Simmonds, the man who effectively led the second British blues invasion of the USA and paved the way for arena rock. Joe Bonamassa recently described him as one of the tastiest blues guitarists. He certainly is. Remarkably, Kim is leading the current Savoy Brown lineup of bassist Pat DeSalvo and drummer Garnet Mims into the band's 55th year with his 41st album, having played over 5,000 gigs. As the new album title suggests, he's not done with the blues yet. Welcome to the show, Kim.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show.
Absolute pleasure. Is the album title to be regarded as conceptual in that it mirrors your undiminished enthusiasm to just carry on rocking then?
Yeah, I think it is. It's exactly what it says. I got enamoured of music. I got enamoured of travelling. I got enamoured of the romance of the blues. When I was very, very young, 13 years old.
Goodness.
And so I'm just continuing the dream as much as I can.
Absolutely. Now, much like Borrowed Time, All Gone Wrong is a kind of a reflective song, so how much should we read into the lyrics as regards your own life experiences then?
Well, I think a lot. I've had a very blessed life, but, I've survived cancer, I've survived a heart attack, I'm as healthy as you can be, but not without, the usual health scares, and then the up and downs of life. I have to say my personal life has been very steady for decades now. But when I was younger and rock and roll star, it was pretty crazy. So I think you get to a certain age, you're aware of your own mortality, and I think I think that you react to it by wanting suddenly realize how important it is to you. And on this new album, some of the reflection did get into the song. Okay, yeah.
Has your aim in your songwriting then always been to kind of tell a personal story with a universal theme so that other people can relate to it?
Well, you try to do that. You're trying to... you're trying to make it universal. With blues, a lot of it is
anyway.
It is actually it's love. There's the love interest. It's usually the man, woman, and the woman. Those trials and tribulations that actually are universal. We all go through that. And then, especially with the new album, I just try to extend it from there, so that the subject matter is a little different from what you may have heard before.
But partly thinking about that, this album's full of kind of contrasting styles and certainly different tone colours. Did you purposefully then aim for a kind of stylistic equilibrium?
That's an interesting phrase. Yeah, I just approached it overlaying some guitars more, and sometimes we have such a good chemistry, the band as a three-piece, that sometimes I'm in the studio and I think I don't want to, I want to just capture the three-piece. I want to capture the three-piece, and but then on this album I didn't lock myself into that.
Right.
Because when you play songs live, it all comes. It doesn't matter what's really on the record. If it's a good song, the song cuts it through live.
Absolutely.
And the band energy makes up for everything else. So I was a little bit more open to add in rhythm guitars, which I did.
Absolutely.
I owned the guitars,
Now, when you started the band, you said your aim was to be, and I quote, a British version of the Chicago blues band. So thinking about the past now, at what point did you think that Savoy Brown became a band in its own right?
Well, I think that, that would have been very interesting. Yeah, I think...
Because you had this sudden explosion, didn't you, from being a club blues band to going to the States and then filling huge places and becoming a phenomenon in your own right. That's what I'm thinking, really.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and it was the chemistry of the band members for certain.
Yeah.
I had Chris Hewden was a great front man. It's always good to have a great front man. But the band musicians were fantastic. The band that cracked the stick.
Yes.
Lonesome Dave, Roger, and Tony. So the contributions to everybody in it. We were a trailblazing band, and one of the things I'm very proud of is that I took a blues band, which was what we were when we first went to the States.
Yeah.
Into the charts, and sort of almost to the top. Certainly not top. Top 5 or anything, but we were in the top 40, and so that's something I'm very proud of. I would think that it was a gradual thing, and you got me thinking. It's a very good question, because I actually think, even though we were sort of a Chicago blues band when we started with John O'Leary and harp, I think that was probably one of the best bands I've ever had. And so right from the start, even though we were doing that, we weren't just parroting what we had heard. We were bringing a brand new energy to the music. And so then we did get into the point was the second album, and you could tell things were starting to happen. There was an individuality going on. Chris Hewden then started writing songs, and that really gave us impetus.
Yeah.
And before you knew it, we had all the elements. We had the songs, performance, stage presence. All those factors suddenly came in about 1969.
So that would be the time, yeah.
All the factors together.
Yeah.
And without that, you can write all the songs you want, but without the performance, you're lost. You can perform all you want without the songs, you're lost. And then you've got to sell it when you're on that stage. And I think all those elements came together in '69 with that particular band. And, we cracked the stage, and I just ran with the ball after that.
Excellent. Now, coming more up to date, your Witchy Feeling album hit number 1 on the Billboard Blues charts, and also topped the iTunes Blues Top Albums charts. And you more or less hit the summit in that respect. Did you then feel that you needed to be on an American label, such as Quarto Valley Records, because it's a Californian-based label?
That was it, really. There's always a language barrier. We were with Roof Records for years. Thomas Roof, love him. He's great. But there's obviously the comfort factor when you have an American label, and because there's logistics. There's to figure out, and there's artwork and everything, and all the simple things are so much easier when you're. When I'm living in America and it's an American label, so that was really
that's what I thought. Actually,
just logistics.
So down the years, you've had countless lineups. People have always mentioned it. There's a great quote about that, which I'm sure you've heard a million times. The band switched lineups as often as Imelda Marcos changed their shoes. In fact, you've been through 60 musicians or more. So my question would be: was John Mayall your mentor in that respect?
John Mayall?
Yeah, in terms of high turnover band personnel, yeah.
No, I mean, I don't know if you... I think, is that what you said? I mean, I'm a fan of John Mayall, I always have been, always will.
Well, he's known for being a band leader and quite...
Yes, he is, and
which is what you do.
Think I knew I was heading that way.
Right.
When I started, it was forced on me with the very first band, John O'Leary left the band. He was the harmonica player in the very first lineup, and possibly one of my favourite Savoy Browns. And when he left, it was forced on me. Now I remember, in fact, I looked at my diaries, and I tried out another harmonica player to replace John, and I realised straight away that replacing someone with the same type of thing doesn't work. Once you're in that situation,
you got to move on.
Where the chemistry's been changed, it's best to look in a different direction, which I did. I brought in a guitar player in. So it was forced on me. Little did I know, immediately, I was now a band leader instead of part of a band. It was my energy, I think, that was rolling the ball along from the very beginning. But I didn't think of it in that terms, I didn't think that I was the band leader or anything like that, or what have you. And until that first time, and before I knew it, and that first band changed, and before I knew it, that ended up like in a mess. It changed again, and all of a sudden, you're on that road.
Okay, I need to play a track shortly, but I've got another quick question. Looking back again, the band has shifted its musical focus, from being a Chicago-influenced British blues band to becoming more of an R&B sounding band, and you also took in psychedelia and boogie, obviously. Also in the early 80s you almost became a commercial rock band. So do you see the last few albums then as squaring the circle in terms of your overall career?
I think so. I'm going through a renaissance. It's very enjoyable. I'm putting the pieces together like that band in '69. You keep working at it and keep working at it. The circle turns. It's like everything else. You always go back to the fundamentals. And if you're a famous sportsman, you're always going back to fundamentals. I think that that's what I've done in this case. I've gone back to fundamentals, and I put the pieces together. And what happens? You put the pieces together, and it rolls along. And invariably, because you live in quite a fast life being a musician, those pieces start separating and go apart. Somebody leaves the band, or something happens, in life. And so all along, you're trying to put the pieces together, or keep the pieces together. And I'm happy to say that those pieces have come together nicely, and a lot is to do with Pat and Garnet on bass.
Well, we'll talk about them a little bit later, because they are an important part of the last 10 years of your Savoy Brown lineup. But let's play a track now. This is called Feel Like a Gypsy. Savoy Brown and Feel Like a Gypsy from the Ain't Done Yet album on Quarto Valley Records. Lovely touch and tone on that track, Kim, and almost a synthesis of Carlos Santana, JJ Cale and Peter Green, perhaps. And I imagine that track must be a significant part of the current set list, when you're actually gigging, of course.
Well, we haven't played it live yet, but it's one of my favourite. And somebody else said it sounds like The Doors. So, you've mentioned a few influences there. I heard the Santana influence as soon as we put on, it wasn't meant to be that kind of song, but as soon as you put on congas, and as soon as you put on the cover, and perhaps with my style of guitar playing, which is, immediately that came to my mind. I thought, this sounds Santana-ish, can't be bad. Now, you've met Peter Green, of course, big influence on me in the past. Somebody else you mentioned, J.D. Cale, the vocals. All these people are, of course, I'm a huge fans of. And so it doesn't surprise me. And the Doors as well. I've listened to the Doors in the old days. So it doesn't surprise me unintentionally that these influences are seen. And everybody has mentioned practically a lot of the tracks. They'll mention somebody else. So this is very, very nice, because these are people, these are influences of mine that are coming out. But I still think that people say to me, I can always tell, Kim Simmonds guitar.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think that, I think my personality is there. And I love the fact that even though I have my own personality, you can tell where I'm coming from. You can tell who I grew up listening to.
Quite so.
That's kind of nice.
Yeah. Now, in terms of your musical heritage, you said that you'd like to be regarded as, and I quote, the architect of the British blues movement of the 60s. But ironically enough, you probably couldn't have achieved that status without breaking big in America. And nowadays it seems to be the reverse journey for a lot of Americans, rock blues bands, having to come to Europe to work. So I suppose you have to go where the market is, really.
Well, yeah, obviously the architect of the blues is hyperbole, but I actually did, I revisited Ain't Superstitious from the very first album, and because I wanted to do it in the live show, and occasionally I do it. I wanted to do something from the very first album, and I played you. I I went back to the track that I got it from, the Howling Wolf track, Ain't Superstitious. And I heard, it shocked me because Hubert Sublin, the guitar player on Ain't Superstitious, plays it completely different. He plays it da-da-dee-da, da-da, da-da-dee-da. But when I got it, I straightened it out. Da-da-da-da, da-da. And I noticed that everybody else played the straightened out version after that. So, I did have a big influence on people. Even
I think so.
That gets kind of lost in the mix.
Yeah.
So that's where you get, the Architect of the Blues. So I think those the very first band and the first album and my arrangements, laid down a groundwork for a lot of stuff in the future. That being said, I've forgotten the rest of it. But there is, I think that, I think I've been influential. Certainly. That is something that I think that we're kind of trying to push now. That I think I've
heritage. That's why they call you a heritage band. Not just you.
Yeah, I think I've hid my talents, under a bushel or wherever the old biblical phrase is, And I'm thinking, hey, I've got to speak up for myself, and I think that with the current renaissance, this was a good time to sort of talk it up, and then of course people can listen to it all and they can make up their own mind.
You've also said about the band in the past that, and I quote, "We were the real thing, Marshalls and Gibson guitars. We were very fresh, very new. People never heard this thick blues guitar before." So having once been cutting edge, Kim, did you ever have a problem in trying to emulate who you once were, or did you always try and break new ground as you went along?
Well, I think when you're younger, you want to be somebody else. You know what I mean? Yeah. We all do, right? It's peer pressure. I want to sound like this because he's great. And I tried to sound like everybody else, but I couldn't do it. I think my technique or my personality or something stopped that. So It always came out as myself, which irritated me, because I wanted to sound like Albert King, or I wanted to sound like, Eric Clapton, somebody around me. And invariably, my own personality got in the way, and for better or for worse, that's what happened. I remember what you said earlier on. Things have come full circle for me, because I'm realizing now that the band is very popular in Germany, and we played in the UK in January. Fantastic. To and fro between the audience and the band. It was wonderful. So, it's kind of interesting that things have picked up on the other side of the pond. And I have been trying to get over there once a year. It can be difficult, but obviously this year, luckily I was there in January, so maybe next year I'll come over, but we'll have to see.
Given what you just said, is it actually easier to cut an album now that your audience has kind of grown up with you and you don't really have to take it into new and unforeseen directions anymore?
Well, there's that to a degree. Yes, I see what you're saying. It at this stage of my career, people are very nice to me. They don't take pot shots so much, because once you've been around this long, you get respect, and that's really, really the nicest thing. I think, to have respect, that's the biggest success you could possibly have. I still trying to make a Savoy Brown album. It has to be fresh. It has to be progressive. It has to be relevant. So there is pressure. There's no point in me playing a shuffle like I did on the very first album, or maybe I've done throughout the career. I'd still like to play shuffles, but I've got to be very careful I'm not repeating myself. And Savoy Brown music is very demanding in that I dropped a song from the new album because it sounded like too much like Motorhead. It was a terrific song. If I say to myself, reflect, that's not Savoy Brown. And so, you try to push the envelope. You try to grow so I'm still trying to grow the music, because I think that's what people expect from Savoy Brown. Well, they don't want to hear something I've done before.
Thinking about that, I just want to throw another quote here, which is relevant to what you've just been saying, and it's this: "I always call the 60s the classic period, the 70s the more commercial period, where the records were really selling heavily on the Billboard charts, and the 80s were the lost period. In the 90s I was able to get the wheels back on, and the past 15 years or so have been the best. So which recent album then do you think kick-started this resurgence in your eyes?
I think it might have been the Voodoo Moon album.
Yeah.
That's sort of, I brought in, we were a three-piece, and then I brought in Joe White in, because I was writing some songs, and I thought I needed a singer that could sing those songs better than me. And so I brought in Joe, and I think that band and the songs I was writing and suddenly the direction was the beginning of this new Renaissance.
Do you ever then feel trapped in terms of your songwriting by the rock blues genre that you work in?
I used to feel that way. I used to think, wow, it's all been done. Why do it anymore? And that was the worst thing I could have done, because that led to a real fallow period for me. And once I got out of that, I realised it's infinite. The blues is infinite. You just got to you've got to really stay open to ideas. You've got to listen to other people all the time, because when you get, if you get old in your head and think it's all been done, there's some 20-year-old going to come and do exactly what you were doing and be successful. So, it's which is happening all the time, so it's infinite. The song ideas are infinite, the lyrics are infinite. Yeah, okay. It's a wonderful feeling, actually, that that blues music, it hasn't got a time limit.
I want to ask you something about that kind of fallow period you mentioned, if only for the fact that you put out Rock and Roll Warriors, that kind of era, and you covered that. You had commercial success with Smokey's Run to Me, which featured Ralph Morman on lead vocals. And I think I'm right in saying, round about that time, you did some arena tours with Judas Priest, no less. So, did you still include that song and the other one, Lay Back in the Arms of Someone, on that tour?
Did I what?
Did you play those songs, Run to Me and Lay Back in the Arms of Someone, on that tour?
No, we never played that on that tour. Because
I think you'd have got bottled off,
no. We, I was invited on because they remembered me from, they used to come and see Savoy Brown, in 67 when I was the and so influenced them playing the Flying V. And so they very kindly got me on the tour. I had a really great band, but it was a difficult period for me. I wasn't.
It was difficult for everyone at the time.
I'm sorry?
It was difficult for everybody at the time because the music completely changed, didn't it?
Oh, was that okay?
Well, it was all Korgs and funny haircuts and the kind of roots music. There was nowhere to go playing what we call roots music now.
But that's very, very true. And
videos,
I'm glad you reminded me of that, because when I look back at the past, sometimes you just look at it from your own perspective, and you look at your own failures, and or you see it in those kind of ways, and then, like you said, then you bring up something else, and it's good that we're reminded that you don't get locked in your own head, because it's as you say about the 80s, we were all going through it. It was a time that I shouldn't take personally, because...
No, really, you shouldn't. I mean, especially in the UK, it was even worse. It was very, very tough. Kim, I want to play another track, if I may, just so people can hear more of this great album. This is Savoy Brown and Devil's Highway. That was Devil's Highway from the brand new Savoy Brown album called Ain't Done Yet on Quarto Valley Records. Back in 2009, you put out a compilation called Too Much of a Good Thing, which covered the 1992 to 2007 era. In terms of your American fans, is there a significant percentage of that audience that might not know the band from before that era?
No, actually, everybody knows the band from the 60s, Obi. Okay. And have followed the band from the very early days. So not quite like it was in January in the UK, where I had people come up to me that were at the Nag's Head in Battersea.
Wow.
Like, whoa. And a lot of people like that. In the States, people were definitely, in the audience today, there are people who were definitely there. The very first tour, and friends of mine now that in my area that I've become friends with, would go, travel all over the place to see Savoy Brown when we first came over, because we were really groundbreaking. And the audience is very, very knowledgeable over here. It's like everybody else. Like, I bought Buddy Guy records when I was 13 years old. I'm still buying Buddy Guy records, and I think that I'm hoping that Savoy Brown and myself can somehow, follow that role model, in the sense that, if people bought records by Savoy Brown in the 60s, they can still buy records now, they can still see the band. And
that's the important thing, yeah.
And there is continuity, and it's, I'm the last man standing here with the band, but still, it's a history that I'm proud of, and I think that it's, I think it's a unique thing. Actually, it's my only band I've ever been in, and here I am. Ain't that yet?
You also nearly brushed the mainstream when you were mentioning the first episode of Martin Scorsese's HBO series, Vinyl. Of course, that must have been a bit of a surprise.
Yes, that
pleasant surprise.
I think a lot of people, but it was true, and that was very, very good. The song Train to Nowhere showed up on some big series over here. It was the main song at the end of a series over here, and then in the Jimi Hendrix
documentary
movie. The producer said to me he wanted a song that he figured that Jimmy would be listening to at that time period, and he figured he had to have been listening to Train to Nowhere.
I think so. Everybody was.
In that song, in that movie as well. I think it was Train to Nowhere. So a lot of people are putting the pieces together. There's not a lot of video on the band. There's not a lot of history on the band in terms of, obviously.
Well, you didn't get Woodstock like 10 years after, for example. That's one of the reasons.
I know. There was a lot of,
and that applied to Family as well, and quite a few other bands, who weren't even on it. So I mean,
Well, that's true, and that's why. You've got to be a music aficionado. You've really got to dig into music. You mentioned Family, one of my favourite bands. We're all fans of Family. So, you've got to look a little deeper. I think when you look a little bit deeper, you find Savoy Brown. It's not something that's going to be placed right in front of your face.
In terms of your live shows, Kim, is it difficult sometimes to be consistent in achieving a consistent tone, really?
It's an ongoing battle, for sure, to keep a tone going. And I think, again, I'm very hard on myself. A producer that was interested in producing the band, and I'm hoping is still interested for the future, said to me, the one thing, I've always had a consistent guitar tone. And that was very nice to hear, because I beat myself up about it, and I work on it all the time. I'd say every day I've been in the studio this morning before this interview,
Great.
And practicing, and you're constantly working on your guitar sound. You constantly want to be better, but I think it's one thing that has been consistent, if I say so myself, and that's been the one consistent thing from Savoy Brown right from the beginning, is the guitar has been pretty consistent throughout, and I think that it's led the band in many ways, and I think that's the glue that's kept the band together. Now, sometimes I play better guitar than other times. When I'm not playing good guitar, then the band doesn't have the glue. When I'm really on top of my guitar playing, even today when we get rehearsals with Pat and Garnet, I have to be on form. I have to walk into that rehearsal studio, on best of form with guitar, because suddenly that gives everybody. Everybody knows then what it's all about. This is it. This is the energy. And even Pat and Garnet, who we were great friends and known each other for years, it's subliminal. If I walk in and I'm not caring about that guitar, subliminally the thing is not going anywhere. So So if I say so myself, the guitar is the glue that's kept Savoy Brown.
Okay, I'm going to play out with Rockin' in Louisiana, which features some acoustic guitar and, well, dobro. Final question, really. You've cut 5 acoustic albums since 1997. Was that something that the younger Kim Simmonds might not have been interested in?
Yeah, you wouldn't have been interested in that at all. Having said that, it wasn't like to be a solo career. It was an antidote to the band, because there's so many stresses and strains with a group, with a band, even when the current band, which is just plain sailing. You still have to deal with promoters, you still have to deal with agents, you still have to deal with travel. So I went into the acoustic the solo side of things just as an antidote. Then I could do solo gigs with the acoustic guitar without the pressures of being Savoy Brown, without all the logistics of running a band. So, but it's true that when I was younger, I wouldn't have been interested in folk blues or anything, but I'm older now and I do like it.
Okay, Kim, it's been an absolute joy having you on the show. Thanks so much for doing this. But before you go, just give us your social media links so people can check out the album and what you're up to.
The main thing is savoybrown.com. That's where even we go to for the gigs, because the gig is not for real unless it's the website, savoybrown.com. I'm on Twitter. We have a Facebook site that a good friend of mine runs. It's fantastic. So, if you go to savoybrown.com, you'll see the Twitter feed and the Facebook feed, and you can go from there.
Thanks so much again. It's been brilliant.
Thank you so much, Pete.
Thanks for listening, and good night.
You've been listening to the Pete Feenstra feature, first broadcast on Sunday, the 26th of July, 2020. Chatting to the legendary Kim Simmonds from the blues rockers Savoy Brown, and that was ahead of the release of a brand new album in August 2020. And you can check out previous interviews via the dedicated page for Pete Feenstra and the Feature Show at our website, where you can catch up also with his Tuesday Rock and Blues show, heading up a 5-hour blues rock marathon. Tuesday is Blues Day. All happening at GetReadyToRockRadio.com. From all of us here at Get Ready to Rock Radio, thank you for listening.